All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Zachary Pohl. I'm the ecosystem principal at the VSP Global Innovation Center. VSP Vision is the largest health-focused vision company in the US, and we serve as its lens into the future, reimagining how care and eyewear are delivered to the world. And we do this in partnership with Matter. Matter is a healthcare technology incubator and innovation hub with a mission to accelerate the pace of change in healthcare. Since they launched in 2015, they've supported more than 1,000 startups from all over the world, and they have a suite of services to help them at every stage of development. They work with dozens of health systems, payers, and life science companies, helping them collaborate with the right entrepreneurs and innovate more effectively. And lastly, they host events focused on healthcare innovation, bringing people together to be inspired, learn, and connect with each other. So today's conversation, the future of diagnostics, is the first in our Lens into the Future series and brings together healthcare leaders and innovators to explore how diagnostic tools, methods, and models are evolving. We'll discuss where AI, venture capital, and clinical science intersect and how these advancements are reshaping the patient experience and accelerating early detection, accuracy, and prevention. So, with that, let's meet our panelists. So, first we have Julianne Roseman. Julianne has been a friend of mine now for, I don't know, 5, 6 years, Julianne. And she is a principal of digital health ventures at Plug and Play Tech Center. She brings over a decade of experience in venture capital and strategy, focusing on digital health startups, advancing preventive care, digital therapeutics, and patient engagement. Next, we have Bindu Shanagala. Bindu is a healthcare innovator, co-founder and chief operations officer of Nurture, a maternal mental health platform that uses AI and predictive analytics to detect and prevent postpartum depression. I first met Bindu and her team at Nurture as a Techstars mentor when Nurture was going through the Techstars program. Bindu has a background leading engineering teams at Intermountain Health, Slight Health, and an MBA from MIT. She blends deep technical expertise with user-centered product development. Her work focuses on using empathetic, data-driven tools to improve early diagnosis and access to care for new mothers. She has also contributed to research on the ethical challenges of AI in healthcare diagnostics. And last, we have Professor Pierce Keene. Professor Keene is a consultant ophthalmologist at Moorfields Eye Hospital and professor of artificial medical intelligence at UCL. He's a global leader in using AI for early detection of retinal disease and a key collaborator with Google's DeepMind on healthcare innovation. So, Pierce, Bindu, Julianne, thank you so much for joining us today. Let's begin the discussion. And I want to start us off with a fun little icebreaker. Since all of you live and breathe diagnostics, let's go around the room with a quick question. What wearables or at-home diagnostics do you use to measure and monitor your health? Let's start with you, Julian.
Yeah, thanks to be here. I like to keep it simple and do what I can with my smartphone, and there's more and more now that you can do with just a phone. So there's standalone apps, there's sort of integrated apps with your, phone of choice, whether you're an Android or Apple person. So anything that I can do with one tool is what I like to use.
That's great. Yes, totally get that. I know I've been feeling so overwhelmed by that. You have to use this AI. It's very overwhelming. Let's go with you, Bindu.
Yeah, so for me, it's right here. So I try to track my steps, exercise minutes, and sleep because it's a holistic approach for health in terms of how we track how our body and mind is functioning. I think Apple Watch does a good job with mindfulness, which sometimes we need, especially as building a startup and just living life sometimes gets overwhelming. And and it reminds you to stand up and walk and take a deep breath. So those are like really gentle reminders of taking care of myself. So thankful for living in this day and age where technology is accessible and can be used for good.
Yeah, and you brought up a really good point, which is the mental health of founders. I actually have a friend who, like, that's his whole business is focusing on improving the mental health of founders. Because he was doing some VC and also ran a startup, and just the anxiety and feeling overwhelmed among founders is so prevalent. So especially like in kind of like coincidentally or ironically around founders who are focused on improving mental health, doing that work is very exhausting. So I totally understand that. Pierce, anything that you're using to track your health?
So, at the risk of being very boring, it's the Apple Watch is the main thing that I use. Um, and I think probably the number one killer app for me on the Apple Watch is not only just measuring my sleep, but also just the alarm function. So I can have a way of waking up in the morning early without disturbing my wife, and and then I can track my sleep, etc. The other thing that I think really it's not a diagnostic, but I think that was really transformative for me over the last few years was just combining everything with my Apple AirPods and being it. So I track my walking, my cycling, etc., on my iPhone and on my smartwatch, and then having the AirPods was the really big thing for me that meant like exercising was no longer a torture for me because I can like listen to audible audiobooks while I'm cycling and things like that. And so that's really been transformative.
Yeah, yeah, I understand that. I was running this morning on a very busy street, and it was very nice to be able to just plug in headphones and be able to listen to nice music. Very much gets me going. And for myself, using the Apple Watch to track my workout this morning, my Aura, which is just great for my stress and mostly my sleep. And then recently, I started using Mind Sarah. It's an online app. I plug in my daily journals to be able to track my daily emotions.
And
And
what you can do, what I was just going to say, what I love to
yeah,
do with the audiobooks is you can train yourself to listen to them at high speed. So I'm on 2.7 speed at the moment. So like it sounds like
wow,
gibberish to anyone else, but then you can kind of like get through stuff really quickly and be super efficient. But that's a whole other story.
that is incredibly efficient. Yes, 1.5 gets me. So yes, 2.7. So let's kind of get into it with such an incredible kind of like diverse perspectives of panelists, but focus on the same subject. So to kick us off, and Piers, let's stay with you. How do you see the landscape of diagnostics changing over the next 5 to 10 years?
Oh, well, I guess this is the type of thing that I get asked. I speak about AI in healthcare at a lot of conferences, and I'm an ophthalmologist, and I have a lot of like doctors and ophthalmologists and optometrists asking me about this. And I guess one of the things to say is that we kind of really don't know what the heck is going to happen in 5 to 10 years horizons, and a lot of the things that are happening outside of health. There's a lot of things happening outside of healthcare that may have these big impacts, whether we like them or not, in a healthcare or a diagnostics setting. So, in terms of the advances in AI, people are now debating about artificial general intelligence, whatever that means, AGI, and whether that's going to be in 2 years or 3 years or in 5 years or in longer terms. So I just would flag that anyone who tells you what 5 years or 10 years from now is going to bring, I think is really, can't do that with any sort of degree of certainty. I think, though, if I was to just sort of speculate on how that might be, like what's the medical version of AGI? Well, I
Yeah.
would call that AMI, artificial medical intelligence, rather than artificial general intelligence. And so, what the way I see that going at least in the short term, is that it's going to give greatly enhanced powers to your family doctors. what we call in the UK your GP, your general practitioner. So I think that we're going to see a situation where your family doctor is going to be able to develop the diagnostic skills that up till now has only been possible if you're a highly specialized doctor, like an ophthalmologist who can look at retinal photographs, or a cardiologist who can look at echocardiograms and things like that. I think that those diagnostic skills will become available in the community to family doctors. And so I kind of imagine the future, like if you think of something like Star Trek, and you know, think of like old school Star Trek from the 1960s with the Bones McCoy was the doctor on the Starship Enterprise. You didn't have a situation back in the 1960s where someone would go to him with like an eye problem, and he'd say, okay, I'm going to send you to the optometrist, who's going to send you to the ophthalmologist, who's going to send you to the retinal specialist. No, he just did all the diagnostic tests together in a fancy sort of swish, and was able to diagnose everything. And so I think that that's what we're going to see: artificial medical intelligence, which is diagnostics superpowers for family doctors in the coming years.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's interesting because most people know Clayton Christensen's The Innovator's Dilemma. His book before that was The Innovator's Prescription, which is essentially kind of like what you're saying, is we're just going to see this downflow of specialty doctors and their diagnosing tools, being able to have their GP or their PCP being able to do that. I think there's also a company called like Q Bio, which is kind of using like this like whole body kind of scanner to be able to check the entire body.
Mm.
And the CEO actually uses the Star Trek analogy for that
Mm.
as well. Let's pass it over to Julianne. Julianne, when you're looking at companies, because you're mainly looking at kind of like early stage. I know Plug and Play also looks at some follow-up rounds and later stage as well, especially if you're corporate partners. But when you look at these early stage companies who could be kind of the dominant diagnosing companies in about 5 years, kind of what's sticking out to you?
Yeah, and to what Pierce said, I'm not as worried about that AGI in the next 5 years because both regulatory will restrain it, as well as the like lack of digitization and the software infrastructure needed to do that in healthcare. We just don't, especially in the US with a very fragmented, maybe the NHS with the more consolidated data will be able to roll some things out faster than us. But I think that's more of a 10-year and 15, 20-year issue, not so much the first 5 years. But for the like in the next couple of years, we've already been seeing this development, but it does take years of R&D, and so it's not like very exciting for consumers too much yet. But in the next 5 years, I think more and more will come out about non-invasive diagnostic tests and tools. Some of these are wearables, some of them are patches and other types of solutions. That's more exciting. The ability to do more readings more frequently, less pain, less inconvenience for the patient, and then be able to push that information to the GP, to the primary care doctor, and have that doctor actually be empowered to do something with all this data, because we're creating a lot of data. And right now the providers, like, they're kind of like, that's nice. What do you want me to tell you? I have your sleep data for a year. What am I supposed to say now, right? And so being able to give that guidance to patients and be able to help them help patients instead of just refer out and like kind of kick them down the chain of the healthcare process.
Yeah, that brings up a good point, which is because, and like I asked this question, like, what are you using? We both brought up like D2C companies, right, that are not associated with the clinic or Stanford Med. Do you see it coming, or these diagnostics kind of like more these non-invasive diagnostics coming from these like new entrants that are going D2C that are somewhat outside your traditional healthcare system? Or do you see it coming from like a more integrated system? Any
I think
thoughts there?
we'll get to an integrated system, but there's a lot of D2C because there is some
Yeah.
consumer interest and demand. Patients are unhappy with the standard of care. They're not getting the answers. They're not getting customized care, personalized care. It takes a long time to get to their doctor's appointment. So they're searching and using what's available to them. And like their doctors kind of have to catch up. But I think in the next couple of years, the doctors will have sort of caught up in that sense using AI and AGI, but also like being able to have more integrated tools so that, they're responding more frequently and engaging with you in just a much more, pleasant way instead of like once a year I go to my doctor and, we chat about
Can,
some stuff and go away. Yeah.
can I just add to that? Like I just like I'm a clinician, and I've spent the last 10 years talking about the need for like robust validation and caution with deploying AI tools and doing things correctly. And I think that's all necessary. And but like we see the advances in AI outside of healthcare and the speed. And like whenever I give a talk about large language models, I of course tell people, oh, you must not use these for healthcare purposes. These are still have these limitations and all these reasons to be cautious. But at the same time, I find myself an extended family member asks me for some medical advice about some area that I know nothing about, or they send me a report from their doctor or something. I find myself uploading it to ChatGPT and asking for advice, even though that's the very thing that I tell people they should not be doing. And if I'm doing that as a doctor, then I think we might find that the consumer world gets ahead of us on a lot of these things.
So the question is, are the consumer companies ready to be such healthcare companies? Is Apple and Samsung, the leaders, in the U.S. market, ready to like take on that responsibility? And then they are in some ways, right? They're getting algorithms, approved by the FDA to measure, sleep apnea and other things. But more and more, they're going to be responsible for your healthcare, which is very interesting.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, that's a great segue to kind of like what Bindu's working on, because uh, privacy in integrated workflows into your hospital systems is just like so paramount and central to what Nurture is doing. So, Bindu, as you're kind of approaching and building trust in your AI-based solution for such a personal high stakes challenge, are you thinking about that? Or how are you making sure that patient data and privacy and integrated workflows and making sure that providers are utilizing that data is done as best as possible?
Yeah, I think when we, first started this organization, this company a year and a half ago, almost this coming June will be 2 years for us. We went about any entrepreneur would do just to find out what the market is, right? Like we know there's a problem, but what is the market telling us? There was 61% of the global respondents say that the greatest benefit of AI in healthcare is improving the ability to diagnose and detect health conditions. That's like, like more than half of the people are thinking that we need to be able to use AI for diagnoses. So that's when we our foot forward, saying, okay, how do we use technology to detect postpartum depression in expectant moms? And as we spoke to our population, who, I think are more self-aware, because thanks to kind of COVID situations, and younger generation now are more aware of what they need and what they want, and the use of technology is pretty great in this population, and everybody, and having someone be on our platform with zero judgment zone and sharing how they're doing is is what was appealing to our population, right? Like, although our initial strategy, and even now, we still want to get into OBGYN offices, small to medium-sized clinics, even a bigger hospital system who see the need. We want to integrate with these OBGYN clinics to see how we could help this population. In terms of data security and privacy, how we are handling it an early stage company is definitely consent. Having consents, taken from the user, saying, hey, the data that you're giving us will be utilized by Nurture to, of course, run through our machine learning models to detect postpartum depression. Luckily, the model that we are using is pre-pregnancy factors. So using that, we also ask, because we are going through the OB-GYNs, we're like, hey, are you okay if we share the data with their OB-GYNs? So far, I had like one patient who said no, like there's still
Mm,
stigma out there where I don't think women want to be labeled, especially at this very, vulnerable state in a way, like women are thinking of, what happens to their career, their financial independence, and because there's more expenses as the baby arrives, in the family. Um, so, so we know that women directly wouldn't want these services, but let's say in a 9-month episode of care, if my OB-GYN said, "Hey, Bindu, I think it's better for you to test out this platform and see if it's going to help you," I might, give it a shot if my doctor said that. So,
Mm.
from a data integration perspective, my co-founder and I come from, technology and interoperability aspects. Anybody who has done that, it's like a minimum $80,000 ordeal. So what we are doing right now is to ensure the data that we are collecting, or we are protecting their data in a HIPAA compliant tools and techniques that we use. At the same time, in our future is to integrate with the clinics to ensure the data is protected. But consent is the main thing. And we know that because we are working on a problem that is very sensitive, we know that the data is going to be, with us or with their provider who's going to um, help them with their, with the care. So I don't know how many of the audience know this, but if you want to take a guess, what percentage of women are undiagnosed and untreated for postpartum depression? Maybe one of you could take a guess. What percent you think?
I have no
What?
idea. 50%?
Yeah, I'd say something similar.
85%.
Wow.
85% of women are undiagnosed and untreated because anybody has ever walked into an OB-GYN's office, payers pay for a 15-minute checkup, and there's physical checks happening. There's, according to the ACOG guidelines, they have to screen women at least 3 times during the episode of care. We have worked with clinics who do not have such resources. And let's say if they collect that data, they're now put in a, kind of a tough situation. What do I do with this data? Do I have a required protocol in terms of where does it, how do I provide this help? That's where I think we see the need. Now OBGYNs could now say, hey, you know what? We are partnered with Nurture, and there's another thing that we are doing. Not only are we predicting, but long term, we are, now that the patients are on our platform, we're actually removing the gap in care, because once the baby arrives, everybody is running to the pediatrician offices because there's so many checks to keep this little baby alive. And moms, miss their postpartum checks. I think 40% women miss their postpartum checks. And then the percentage is really worse with women of color. 60% women miss their 6-week postpartum checks. So really hard to catch these. I think that is another gap of care that we are trying
Yeah.
to fill in. And yeah, from of course, when we talk about AI, our initial model hallucinated, right? So I'm like, okay, I do not want to get the solution out there. But I think technology has improved, that GPT models have improved since we first did that. But we also know in healthcare, I think as Julian said, there's regulations. We want to make sure we are doing the right thing for the patients. Yeah, we have really we're always thinking of the guardrails on how to ensure we predict it. And then once the high risk patients come onto our platform, the prevention protocol that we're using is a clinically proven protocol. So we give them a little flavor of AI through that process, when especially there's some aspects of journaling that women love to, like talk about their experience. So, and how to respond to that, but then bring them right back to the protocol, because we know that protocol it's proven to prevent postpartum depression up to 53%, which is 1 in 2 moms. And the other 47% could go through different other interventions. Anyway, I don't know if I answered your question, Zach, but I just wanted to give more awareness of this problem as well, if people have not heard about it.
No, that's really great. I mean, one thing that's so because I mean, you're at the intersection of maternal care as well as mental health. So two standalone, very sensitive subjects. So together, that's great. And what's so interesting there is you mentioned being able to augment or provide complementary value because of the constraints on providers and health systems, because you're looking at that 15-minute check. It's 15 minutes, right? Not an hour, 2 hours. So being able to provide what could happen if it were a longer time, but because there's a 15-minute constraint there. And what's also interesting is being able to get consent and asking for your OBGYN, especially and I've loved some of the reports that have come out of Rock Health recently. Some people, a non-insignificant part of the population, trusts health influencers on social media channels like TikTok and Instagram over their provider. The majority, by far the majority, still believe or trust their own doctor more than them, but we do see some of a rise there. So being able to kind of go through your OBGYN, there's obviously so important to be able to gain consent and make sure that the patient trusts what's being given to them, because it's so important to get the trust of the patient, not just giving them the information, but that they're going to trust and receive the information. And yeah, go ahead. Anything you wanted to add there?
So while Bindu made has a very specific case study, I think it applies any other health condition. So your doctor you're really only getting 15-minute appointments in the US, right? And so there's some really great questions in the Q&A, but like how are, the GPs incentivized to do this? But in the US, we're seeing the startups say, okay, there's a CPT code for this. If you use it, then you can make additional revenue on this 15-minute visit. But also we can help you expand your care, because you can't change, these clinics they don't have the room to say, okay, we're going to do 30-minute visits with all of our patients now. We just don't have the capacity to do that. But we do have a full care team of other providers. So beyond just the MD, you have, right, your NP and your other folks, and you have digital clinics, right? Telemedicine is there. And so you can refer that patient out to a digital health company that can help provide additional care, not at the level of your MD, but to supplement that 15-minute appointment and still bring revenue back to the clinic. That's really important for them to maintain. They keep their patients, but they're also getting way better care. So I think there's some really, Brenda, you just brought up so much in your comment.
Yeah. I want to get to something which is, and so our team, we post these futurist reports, which look at the future of a certain industry. We posted one on the future of generative AI in healthcare last year, and in a couple of weeks, we're going to launch our next one, which is on oculomics. And oculomics is really the study of being able to look into the eye to be able to detect diseases throughout the entire body. And Pierce is really one of the world leaders at this. So, Pierce, you've been doing a lot of research and work using AI and retinal imaging for early detection of diseases. What has been the most surprising or promising outcome of this work so far? And if you want to use this opportunity to maybe give 30 to 60 seconds of kind of what from your perspective, oculomics is, and some of the more common diseases that you can detect that people wouldn't immediately think of by just examining the eye.
Yeah. So I guess some context for the people who are watching is, we have known as doctors and healthcare professionals for more than 100 years that we can use the eye to pick up systemic disease. So even going back to the 19th century, doctors were seeing changes in the eye in people who had kidney failure that was causing very, very high blood pressure. It was causing changes in the back of the eye. And of course, we've known that you could pick up things like anemia and diabetes and other things through examining your retina. The retina is, of course, the nerve tissue that lines the back of the eye. And so I think what's happened in the last 10 years or so, maybe 5 years or so, is that we've had a convergence of three different things. So we've had advanced retinal imaging becoming widely available. And so in particular, that's this technology called OCT, which is optical coherence tomography. And OCT can give very, very high resolution images of the retina in just a few seconds in a completely non-invasive way. And we're seeing it now being offered as part of, you go to your local optometrist to have an eye test, and you'll, at least in the UK, you'll have an OCT scan done as part of that. So advanced retinal imaging. Other thing is big data. So big studies like UK Biobank and other kind of national and international studies with just huge amounts of retinal images. And then the last thing is all the advances in AI, in particular deep learning for image analysis. And so what happened then was in 2018, there was a team from Google that published a paper in one of the Nature journals where they essentially got all of the retinal photos from this big study called UK Biobank. And they tried to see how they could predict cardiovascular disease from retinal photos. And they got like pretty good results, not necessarily game changing, but kind of interesting. But then the really kind of unusual and surprising thing was that they found that they could predict patients' age and they could predict their biological sex from retinal photographs. And so you may say, well, like, what's the point of that? There are easier ways to tell if it's a man or a woman than looking at a retinal photograph. But the reason why people like me got so excited about this was because even though I'm a retinal specialist and I've been looking obsessively at retinal photographs for like my entire career for like 20 years or more, I can't begin to tell whether it's a man or a woman just from looking at a retinal photograph. But the algorithm can do it with this very high accuracy. And so it suggests then that there's a lot of additional biological information that is captured within these high dimensional images, whether it's retinal photographs or it's OCT scans. So what has happened then that has just sort of unlocked this whole new field. And in fact, it was one of my collaborators in a paper that I contributed to who coined the term oculomics in 2020, 2021, around about then. And so now we go to conferences like the big ophthalmology and vision science conferences, and there's whole sections which are devoted to oculomics because we're finding that you can pick up neurodegenerative diseases, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, other things. You can pick up cardiovascular disease. You can pick up other conditions. And so we're now in this phase where we're trying to do all this early stage research. There's a number of companies now that have I think even some of them have breakthrough designation with the FDA to start to begin to bring these devices to market, and that's exciting because the public health implications could be huge. Because when you turn 40 in the UK, you'll get your family doctor will send you a text message on your phone saying come in for your NHS cardiovascular health check. And most people ignore it. So I'm 46 and I got this text message a few years ago and I was busy and I just ignored it. But I've been to have my glasses checked a couple of times since then.
Yeah. Yep.
And actually, if we could pick up systemic disease when you go to your optometrist, just think about the public health implications of that.
Yes, we so glad that you mentioned that last part because we see VSP, we have over 80 million members, 40,000 doctors in our network, almost all in the US. And we see so many of our patients and members who their optometrist is their front door to the healthcare system. And then so being able to help them with their full body health, especially as we're aging, we see as such an opportunity to be able to help not just the individual, but populations at scale for being able to improve health access and equity. So we really see a lot of opportunity for us to be able to improve lives there because of exactly that. And so, by the way, Julian, we just kind of got specific into oculomics and being able to detect a whole host of diseases through the eye. So I kind of want to bring things out and broaden them because that's what you do is you're looking across that entire landscape. What are the investment signals you're watching when it comes to diagnostic startups, especially those building in AI, mental health, or women's health? And maybe not just think about the investment signals, but is there anything on the corporate side that you're seeing your corporate partners really ask for to be able to help diagnose patients. You serve as the innovation hub for so many healthcare systems.
Yeah, I mean, I love the eye as the window to the health of the rest of the
Yeah.
body. I think there's so many applications and we're not doing it enough. We're not touching it enough. And eye is so accessible. I mean, there's right three of us are wearing glasses right now. We have to go get these prescriptions renewed in the US on a regular basis. You can't, you want, update your lens, stuff like that. So, and they're everywhere, right? It's in Walmart, it's in Target. You walk in, the eye center's right there. So the fact, you can just catch so many more people. So I don't think it's too specific at all. I think there's so much more and it's not talked about enough. But some of the other things we're seeing, I mean, like I said, sort of less invasive, more at home, like what can be done in a more consumer-friendly way, and both by comfort level, but also ease of use, like not having to go to schedule a set appointment at a set day and time, which is going to be delayed anyways. Your doctor's appointment's never at the time you actually set it to be. So how can you do the things that your doctor wants you to do, or the pharma company whose drug you're on wants you to do in a way that actually works with your life.
Yeah.
And then we're seeing, the more that we get these diagnostics on the market, we're building up more data sets. The AI learns from itself and learns from the data we're putting in. So the ability to have more specific algorithms to cover, to update our diagnosis, clinical decision trees on when we should flag a patient based on their, their background or the diversity of who they are. I know, Bindu, you talked about, African American women are screened even less than white women for depression. Like that issue is so important. So how do we do that for all conditions, all types of patients, all ages? So there's like less people left behind. And yeah, I know you kind of asked a broad question. I'm trying to see if there's other things I want to say about it, and then like I said, there's so many good questions in the chat, so I'm trying to answer a couple of those too.
Yeah, well, and you bring up a really good point. And so, Bindu, I want to bring you in here for this because I was recently reading the report that your team came out with at the beginning of the month, which was about, first thing was about your personal journey, but then also you got into the clinical trials that your team kind of just completed and the adherence rates. And in mental health, when you look at like the top apps or chatbots, however they're provided, we're literally looking at like 3% of patients are continuing to use them after 60 or 90 days, right? 97% of people drop. And so you just went through this. And so what do you see as the biggest barriers to adoption of these diagnostic tools, whether it's on the provider side, the system side, or the patient side?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, there are a couple of things I want to cover. I saw one question regarding, just the trust factor with AI and everything. What we have seen is the industry success percentage is 34, 34% adherence rate, 34 to 40% adherence rate to digital therapeutic tool is like amazing in the market. And when we first deployed our platform into a couple of clinics for initial pilots, we've noticed that we've learned a lot through this process. One thing that I've specifically noticed is that when we had this content out there, which is like 10 minutes a day, could you spend 10 minutes a day? That was too much.
Yeah.
Too much for a mom that's preparing, for a baby while trying to wrap up work or, just life in general. So we are gonna conduct another, trial in terms of we actually made that content really bite-sized content, which takes like less than 2 minutes, but still there's meat in the content where she's walking away learning something that'll come into use during her postpartum phase, right? From the so yeah, so and one other thing that we learned is nudges. So,
Mm,
we call ourselves the Duolingo of postpartum depression. So I've been on Duolingo for like what, 270 days or something. There's no
congrats.
way I would be on that tool if I didn't see those nudges that these nudges that if they send me a nudge every day at 10 a.m. I know how to ignore it, snooze it, all of that, right? But they have nailed the nudging strategy that we're going to test out to see, because
Mhm.
they see my activity when I'm, it's usually like 2 minutes before I go to bed, because I just don't want to lose that streak, or be part of that leaderboard or whatever. So we're trying to figure out what kind of incentives will help women to be on the platform, and with with this like bite-sized content, because the novelty of what we are doing is the prediction aspect plus clinically proven protocol coming together, and we want these women to finish these sessions before the baby arrives. That's the whole point of it. So yeah, I'm super excited for the future. I know there's so much going on around, but we always have to look for the excitement, because I know that we have a good nudging strategy that we want to deploy and learn from our users. I'm big about the voice of the customer. In fact, this morning I was reading something on, an article from Scott Wallace is like a psychiatrist and a writer, and he was asking this sharp question about, why do you expect AI chatbots to be perfect at mental health when human therapists aren't? So
Yes. Yes.
he argues that all these AI tools, and we have human therapists that might just misread you, or and you're just not a good fit, or may ghost your session or give you bad advice. But we accept that as part of the norm, like, oh yeah, we are humans, we make mistakes. But then when AI stumbles, it's outrageous. AI
Yes.
cannot stumble. So yeah, anyway, I think that's just a good perspective as we all learn in this whole AI world, that we have to understand that AI is learning, and the best part is it's improving based on the data inputs that we provide. So anyway, he was not saying to lower the bar, but what he is saying is we should compare AI to actual options, but not a fantasy of like a flawless care, because we're already we are a sick care industry. We haven't gotten to a healthcare. I think AI will help us. I'm optimistic about it. And as long as we are not making, mistakes through AI at a life-threatening situation, because that's where we have to be like 100% sure, do we want to deploy this, right? But I think there's so many other opportunities within healthcare industry that we could use technology to make it a healthcare, and not just like sick care.
Yes. Yes. Very much agree on a couple of the points that you said. I want to come back to nudging.
Mhm.
Um, Nudging is nudging the right way,
Yeah.
and doing it in the right way is a great way to be able to increase adoption rates.
Mhm.
So like generally, like anybody's like has any of you seen stuff that has worked really well in being able to drive patient adoption rates of these technologies, or even something that you've seen tried that actually didn't work out?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, oh my gosh, we could be here for another hour. Zach. Um, so there are certain clinics that are doing centering. I think women thrive in a social aspect, right? Like social connection is a big thing. So one mom, let's say she's due end of December, but another mom is due at the same month, and both are delivering a baby girl. Like look at the journey that they could go through from the time they deliver a baby to later, right? Did we lose Zach? Oh, Zach's here. I think he's like
No,
really
no, no. Very focused.
very focused, because I've been having internet issues in our neighborhood. I just want to make sure you guys didn't lose me. So the connection aspect. So we know that social connection is one thing that was our initial idea actually, as when we wanted to like implement nurture like social connection. But we know there's Facebook groups, there's Instagram, there's all of this. But we went the clinical way, like how do we clinically, have a protocol that'll help women, because we are dealing with vulnerable population in the future, right? But prediction is easy. Prediction sometimes we many times like we don't know what their current situation is, but then we know that in the future they might be of high risk. So there's that. The social connection aspect has been super helpful. So we have one clinic that does centering, and there was one patient that actually completed all the modules and came to the next centering session and told the other moms, other, pregnant women in that group, saying, nurture is like a gym to your mind. Go and do these sessions because it's going to help you with prepare you for your postpartum phase. So that's a success we've recently seen. The other thing is we have these, as soon as someone logs into our platform, you get this email or a text message. I haven't seen huge success there. But once they are on the platform and we send a clinical, dashboard to the OBGYNs, whoever, the OBGYN that's taking care of the patient. And when they have a conversation with their patient saying, hey, how is nurture going? That's another nudge that's been helpful for them, saying their doctor asking, hey, how is it going? Have you completed this?
Interesting.
Because one of the things that we do is we have something called EPDS, Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale. So we are using proven, surveys like PHQs and EPDS, and how are they measuring before and after, and then throughout like 12 to 18 months after the baby arrives. So um, the hard part is catching it when it is happening. And since they're on our platform, we do daily mood management, even the daily mood management, like we have it there, but then every time they come onto our platform, they have to like just check in to see how they're doing. So that is when we catch if somebody absolutely need a human intervention. Because let's say somebody is not doing well. Let's say, for example, the EPDS scale 18 is really bad. Anything 11 and above, you need to like they need to speak to a human. So in those situations, we know that our platform is going to help them get the right care when they need it. So
Yeah.
so yeah, we're seeing some success there. I think we've tried different things. There's email, there's texting, and there's nudges within our platform. So we're still like figuring out what really helps. One thing though, having OB-GYNs be advocates to nurture has been a huge help. So all the clinical trials we are doing, we have, we consult with OB-GYNs to continuously help
Mhm.
them be informed about the work that we are doing, so they have more confidence in terms of the prediction and prevention work we are doing. So,
Yeah, and just
and
chime on to you, Bindu. So the nudges is important. The provider recommendation or like sort of prescription is always really helpful. It also gives that trust to this new digital tool, which is really important for patients and consumers. And then
Yeah.
something we didn't talk about is like the peer-to-peer connection, the community, and sometimes even group intervention. Shout out to Rhonda in the chat for that comment. Being able to connect with other peers. You see this organically happening. People have Facebook groups and Reddit threads and things like that who have their same condition, but that's not vetted, that's not monitored, right? That's the spread of misinformation. And so how do you use technology to connect patients in a more verified way that is still like a pure, volunteer effort. It's not like you're being paid or anything, but people want to share and they want to share their experience and what worked for them and what didn't. And that can just be really connective tissue that keeps that sticky engagement to keep people on their healthy intervention or their healthy habit they're trying to build, whatever that check-in is that they need. And then obviously if they're sort of, depending on what condition is, if they're feeling better, maybe that drops off at a certain point, but you're always maybe connected to that experience. Years later, you're not in that, postpartum depression, but you can remember and you can relate and then maybe still give back to new moms and be like, look, I know you're in the fog now. I'm out of it. Like, let me sort of talk you through it and kind of give you that perspective of being on the other side. And that could be the other side of your cancer diagnosis, the other side of, whatever health condition where you're in a really good spot now and give that sort of like hope and light and talk about the journey to get, on to a better place.
those are great points. I think a quick plug in terms of the future of nurture is we want to be a prediction and prevention play in so many arenas. I think I just saw a question about infertility. We've been talking to, these infertility clinics on how to help them, because that's a really stressful journey for any couple, or, anyone that's wanting to be a parent, and it's been so hard for them. So yeah, there's cancer diagnoses, the whole journey for how do we help women throughout their in different phases of their lives and different vulnerabilities that they face through their health. So yeah, that's the future. Prediction and prevention play. So
Here's because one thing that I'm so interested in is um, being able to use these diagnostic tools, a fundus camera or another way to get these OCT images, and being able to drive better adoption of them. Do you see better adoption as being able to increase the access for providers, whether it's an ophthalmologist, an optometrist, maybe you're a GP, or do you see it another way? How do you see being able to drive better adoption of oculomics playing out?
Well, so I mean, I think that the truth is that we're still in relatively early stages. So I think of it as two halves. So the first half is going from an idea to an algorithm, and the second is going from code to clinic. And I think a lot of what we're doing is still in the kind of early development, research and development phase. So it's almost like we're trying to search around through all the systemic diseases to find like where is there the strongest signal from the eye, whether it's liver disease or kidney disease or
Mm.
neurodegenerative disease or other things like that. And so then people like me are trying to publish research papers where we actually show some proof of concept that it can work, and we get to a certain performance level and that it's robust and reliable and things like that. But then really, then once you publish your nature paper or whatever, the next thing, it turns out the harder part is going from code to clinic. And so you have all these barriers that you've alluded to. So, have you got the right use case? So, if you can predict blood pressure from a retinal photograph, you know, is there going to be a use in a sort of optometry setting for that? And is that better than just going to your family doctor and getting to measure your blood pressure or something like that? So finding the right use case. Then, of course, there's the sort of the blockers, like you're going to have to do proper clinical validation, make sure it works in different populations, in different settings, do the proper clinical trials, see how that lines up with regulatory clearances that are required, and that costs a lot of time and money and all of those things. But then how are you going to integrate that with the imaging systems, like the ophthalmic imaging systems, the OCT machines, and the retinal cameras in your optometry department? Does that integrate? Do you partner with the vendors of those machines to integrate there, or do you have it in some kind of third-party way? Do you is it something that can be deployed locally, or does the information have to go to the cloud? And if so, is there some kind of requirements in terms of IT maturity in the community in whatever setting it's going to be used? But then I guess for me, the last thing and the biggest thing that I'm kind of struggling with, and that I think the field is struggling with, is around the business models for these things. Like, I'm a clinician, and so when I came to this field, I'm always thinking like, let's just start with the area of biggest clinical need, and then everything else will take care of itself. But actually, as I've become kind of more older and kind of less naive about these things, I'm like, start with the thing with the best business model, and then all the clinical need will take care of itself. So is it going to be click fees? Is it going to be subscriptions? Is it going to be something else, like payments at a healthcare level, at an institutional level, or something else? And from my perspective, at least in eye care, I'm not sure whether people have really figured out the business models yet for this.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. And I want to kind of conclude this conversation with and I see this as a question in the chat, which I think is great. We've talked about diagnosing, um, but and Bindu, you did touch on this, being able to know that you have a heart health condition is great. What's better is being able to then improve it, right? Being able to see that my sleep is horrible. Isn't that great to know if I can't do anything to improve it? The point is to get healthier. So when we're thinking about these diagnostics, uh, then going to being able to improve it. Any last kind of like thoughts or words there that you found very valuable?
I mean, behavior change is hard for everyone. And I think the beauty of using AI and applying it to the space is you can create different approaches to different patient populations. It's the same way that we sell other products to patients, all the marketers, we have to learn from them. It's like, how do you get all these diverse different people to buy the same thing? They have different messages to those people. And so AI can really help us do that to say, like, look, that approach isn't going to work for Bindu but they will work for peers. So, we can target and adjust and super personalize, and AI lets us do that. So I think there's a lot of hope to be had. And again, AI also can do all the 24/7 work that humans can't, because we need nudges at all nights, all times of day. We need the engagement, we need the hand holding, and no one wants to admit they want it, but it's true. If you really want to change, it's hard. And especially when you're trying to do something like, get your weight in check for your diabetes, or keep, moving on something that has a lot of checkpoints in your health. So I think that's a big thing. And I know one topic we didn't talk about, but patient data and privacy concerns, that would be the other sort of big topic and I again think there's a lot of hope to be had in the future of the regulations coming out about it, and how we culturally also think about owning our own data and being able to take that with us and feel more empowered by having all this data about ourselves.
Can I just also add that we are struggling with all these clinical questions around integration with healthcare systems and payments and business models and all of that stuff. But in parallel, there's so much good AI work being done in the preclinical space, figuring out biology. You've got your alpha folds, you've got your protein structure, all of that stuff. I just feel confident that while we're figuring out the clinical stuff, these other guys are going to be figuring out all the preclinical stuff. So we're going to have new treatments. We're going to understand the language of biology comprehensively in the coming years. So I think that will unlock the new treatments that will slot in when we need them in the next decade.
Yeah, definitely agree. That I think it's a very exciting area. And that's actually Google's newest spinout that just raised like $600 million. It's one of the main parts to what they're trying to do. And then so we are at time. And so for our audience, thank you so much for joining us. If you'd like to connect with the VSP Global Innovation Center, you can email us at globalinnovationcenter@vsp.com, or reach out directly to me or any of our incredible panelists. We're all on LinkedIn, very easy to find. This was our first event in our 4-part Lens into the Future event series. So please be on the lookout for the next one, which will be announced soon. And be sure to keep an eye out for the upcoming VSP Vision Innovation Challenge. Applications will be opening soon, and we'd love to see some of your companies participating. So with that, thank you again. Thank you so much to our panelists. This was a fantastic discussion. I had a great time. Thank you so much, everybody.